Imagine a single change so catastrophic to the timeline of humanity that every legend, every war, and every betrayal rewrites itself. Picture the Primarchs meeting the Emperor 10 millennia earlier, not as scattered champions forged by distant worlds, but as a unified cohort awakened together on Terra. This is not a small tweak. It is a tectonic shift that collapses the origin points of loyalty, trauma, and rivalry. Today, we open that impossible door. We will follow a timeline where the flight of the Primarch's pods fails, where the sabotage that scattered them never happens, and where 20 superhuman leaders wake inside the palace itself. These are not Primarchs shaped by alien suns and brutal childhoods. They are prodigies of design, intelligence, and raw will, blank slates with cosmic scale potential. That single divergence forces everything after it to change. How the Emperor rules, how legions form, how politics, war, and culture evolve. If you love Warhammer lore, From the first moment, the Emperor faces a choice he never had before. In original history, the Primarchs were scattered across the galaxy by a sabotage event that shaped each character by circumstance. In our timeline, that sabotage fails. The Emperor completes the gestation and the pods open in the shadowed halls of the palace. 20 Titans rise, each a living archetype of leadership, war, cunning, art, and ruin. But none carries the scars of alien suns or brutal upbringing. They are not preformed by tragedy. They are raw, unbelievably powerful, and emotionally unanchored. The Emperor understands the danger immediately. 20 apex commanders unbound by local culture could uplift humanity beyond recognition, or annihilate everything by accident or ideological collision. His solution decides everything. They will be kept together, trained together, and raised as a singular brotherhood under direct tutelage. That decision alone erases one of the largest fractures in later history. Raised as a unified core, the Primarchs learn each other's strengths and weaknesses from the outset. Horus does not become a rival forged by favoritism. Guilliman is not hardened by provincial grudges. Angron never hardened into madness by slave pits, and Magnus receives psychic discipline without catastrophic corruption. Brotherhood replaces the fragmented loyalties that once drove catastrophic betrayal, but unity breeds new complexity. The Emperor now must mediate between equals who are all natural leaders. Some favor legislation and structure. Others crave engineering dominance or martial liberty. These early philosophical differences become political factions rather than psychic temptations. The Great Crusade that eventually unfolds is nothing like the original. It is methodical, centrally coordinated, and far faster in technological and territorial consolidation. Militarily, the legions under these Primarchs operate like integrated task forces from day one. Campaigns are run with logistics, doctrine, and intelligence as the decisive factors, rather than heroics or demonic spurts of power. Orc incursions are countered with interdiction corridors. Tyrannid threats trigger systemic evacuation and baited kill zones, and Necron awakenings are anticipated with preemptive combined strikes. Warp navigation and standardized protocols reduce travel risk and open reliable supply lanes. Fleets can operate on synchronized doctrine and shared command, a strategic multiplier no scattershot crusade could match. The Empire expands quickly because coordination replaces chaos, and whole sectors gain stable governance in decades instead of millennia. The age of strife still looms, but humanity answers it with unprecedented organizational firepower. Culture transforms under persistent central leadership. Without the warp-fueled myth of demonic corruption as the primary social engine, religion morphs into civic mythology and monument. The Emperor is framed more as an architect and planner than a martyr figure. Propaganda praises governance, engineering feats and stability. The Mechanicum, relieved of certain metaphysical paranoia, leans toward collaborative engineering while still guarding secrets. Technological advancement accelerates without the constant cost of demonic cleanup. Psychers are institutionalized, trained through sanctioned academies and used for navigation, communication, and research rather than public execution. Education shifts from doctrinal fear to practical competence. The result is a pragmatic population, technically skilled, more nationalist in identity, and less consumed by religious ritual, yet often numb to moral nuance. But the lack of demonic threat exchanges one horror for another: cold institutional brutality. Unified power allows for faster, more efficient suppression measures. When a region faces an existential insectoid swarm or famine, centralized logistics can decide planetary sacrifice swiftly and ruthlessly. Policies become algorithms of life and death, triage lists, quarantine edicts, and engineered famine relief applied where useful. Leaders justify these decisions with utilitarian logic. To save thousands, millions may be abandoned. The Primarchs, brilliant and decisive, can enforce this calculus without the fog of cults and corruption. That capacity makes the Imperium technically stronger, but morally bleaker. The machinery of survival can easily become the machinery of oppression when ethics take a backseat to species continuity. Political fractures still appear, but in different form. The great temptations of the warp no longer whisper to commanders. Instead, ideological schisms explain rebellion. Perdurabo's insistence on fortification and systemic control clashes with Guilliman's legalism. Mortarion distrusts technocratic overreach and champions quarantine. Lemon Russ protests centralized command in favor of martial autonomy. These cleavages are ideological, disagreements about methods, priorities, and the acceptable price of survival. In this context, coups look like technocratic revolutions. A Primarch coalition could rationalize seizure of power as an act of necessary correction rather than corruption. The Horus Heresy, as it happened, is erased, but the narrative hollow it leaves fills quickly with coup plots, statecraft rivalries, and philosophically justified betrayals. Xenos relations evolve dramatically. Eldar craft worlds view an early united humanity with cautious curiosity and strategic concern. Some Eldar favored trade and containment. Other factions prepare defenses. The Tau accelerate their diplomatic reach upon encountering a coordinated human polity, sparking an earlier, sharper Cold War between ideology-driven empire and pragmatic human federation. Orcs, with a less chaotic warp, remain relentless but more predictable. They are met with relentless, systematized suppression instead of mythic battles. Necrons, with their cold logic, exploit procedural rigidity and target infrastructure. Tyranids remain the blunt existential threat, a biological storm that forces humans, Eldar, and allied forces into brittle coalitions that rise and fall with supply chains and strategic patience. Technology becomes both savior and weapon. Without demonic corruption, arcane sciences take on practical shape. Stabilized warp relays, refined psychic engineering, and safer astral communications. Yet the same advances enable psychosocial control, mass suggestion networks, memory sanitization, and behavioral engineering. Warfare moves beyond brutal melee into delicate systems attacks, orbital railguns, precision void mines, and infrastructure denial that starves or suffocates societies without dramatic spectacle. Battles are cleaner to film, but crueler in consequence. Creative innovation focuses on survival-relevant breakthroughs, anti-Tyranid bioweapons, Necron jamming electronics, and planetary defense architectures, producing a tech landscape optimized for efficiency, not wonder. Propaganda, law, and daily life are remodeled. State media celebrates engineering triumphs and civic duty. School drills train children in logistics and emergency protocols rather than anti-witch catechisms. Monuments commemorate terraforming projects and successful evacuations. Power concentrates in administrative ministries that control data, supply, and surveillance. Intelligence and counterintelligence become preeminent arts. A single compromised supply node can doom a dozen worlds. Ritual remains as social glue, but stripped of metaphysical fear. It becomes ceremonial remembrance rather than exorcism. Underneath, human hunger for meaning still births charismatic leaders and corporate cults, offering identity and agency. Personal tragedies persist, only reframed as institutional choices. A captain refusing to execute a planetary purge is tried for treason instead of being labeled heretic. A scientist sabotaging a psyop faces legal execution rather than purification. Sanguinius's compassion turns into organized rehabilitation programs that coerce assimilation. Kurz's terror tactics are criminalized, turned into political crimes, judged by technocratic tribunals. The dramatic, cosmic horror of daemon-fueled corruption. So which timeline is worse? The original, chaotic universe full of mad gods and desperate heroism, or this cold, efficient empire of coordinated control? The answer is ambiguous and uncomfortable. The original creates visceral tragedy and mythic sacrifice that forge legend. It produces martyrs whose stories rally resistance. The alternate suppresses madness and superstition, but replaces them with systemic, rationalized cruelty. Purges, algorithmic sacrifices, and moral calculus handed down from above. It may spare some worlds from certain torments, but it also institutionalizes the capacity to erase populations for a strategic calculus. The line between protector and tyrant blurs. The same unity that can save species can also suffocate freedom. In the end, the Primarchs meeting the Emperor 10 millennia early does not produce a simple utopia or a tidy dystopia. It creates a different kind of nightmare. Brilliant, bureaucratic, and efficient. It strips away some mythic poetry and replaces it with a moral calculus that forces us to ask what we value more: survival guaranteed by ledgered decisions, or the messy human freedom that invites chaos and sacrifice. If you want a deeper dive, our next episode will simulate a coalition led by Guilliman and Dorn against a tyrannid hive fleet under these conditions. We'll map supply corridors, evacuation protocols, and the moral decisions that choose who lives and who dies. Subscribe, like, and drop a comment. Which Primarch would you trust to choose humanity over liberty?